while he was in office, President Biden's mental decline and health deterioration was intentionally covered up. How did this happen? CBN's Billy Hallowell joins me now. Billy, what's your thoughts on this?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. You know, for a long time, a lot of people were raising concerns. Going back to 2020, there were people saying, is Biden capable of doing this? Does he have memory issues, right? And a lot of people dismiss these things as unfair. They dismiss them as improper, as, maybe ageism. There were all sorts of different claims. But now you have a book that has come out by Jake Tapper. He's one of the co-writers of it. I'm just going to read you a little line from this. I think it's important we read it because it answers the question you're asking. It says, what the world saw at his one and only 2024 debate was not an anomaly. It was not a cold. It was not someone who was underprepared or overprepared. It was not someone who was just a little tired. Now, what they're referring to there, all the excuses that were given for Biden's terrible debate performance. But here's the next part. It was the natural result of an 81-year-old man whose capabilities had been diminishing for years. Biden, his family, and his team let their self-interest in fear of another Trump term justify an attempt to put at times addled old man in the Oval Office for 4 more years. I don't know people's hearts. All I know is if you see somebody who you think is diminished and struggling, and those concerns go all the way back to 2020 or at least 2022, and you're not speaking up about it, that's a problem.
And I think this goes back to the point of why do people not trust the mainstream media? It's because the mainstream media is giving them all of these reasons not to trust them. I mean, you go back to all the, I don't even want to get into the details, but all the things that were said during COVID where this wasn't true, that wasn't true, this was a mistruth. You weren't even allowed to talk about it. You would be deplatformed and demonetized for even having the conversation about things that turned out to be true. So when you're asking, why do people not trust the media? Well, it's because it's your own fault. And now you have this where it's like, listen, President Biden is obviously suffering from a terminal illness at this point. And so it's not, about shaming him, but it's like, this is why people don't trust you, because not only was there a cover up, you accuse people of being, dishonest or even dangerous for even bringing up the idea that, hey, maybe there might be something else going on here. And again, to your point, I think it's worth reading. This isn't the first few lines from an article from CNN talking about this thing. It says, quote, in the final 2 years of his presidency, Joe Biden had private moments where he could not recall the names of top aides, had an increasingly limited private schedule, was prone to incoherence and losing his train of thought, and was hidden from the public eye to shield the extent of his decline. This was the leader of the free world. I'm not talking about left, right, conservative, liberal. You're admitting that y'all knew that he was not all there. And this is not even about President Biden. This is dangerous stuff. This is not even a political statement. This is like, if you want to know why no one trusts the mainstream media, it's because you're giving them all the reasons in the world not to trust you, and then later admitting, yeah, we covered that up. Yeah, that was a lie. Yeah, we were censoring you. It's not shocking to me why no one trusts the mainstream media. Billy, what should we do with all this information now that it's like everything that people kind of claim or question 2 years later is now, oh, that was true. So how should we navigate situations like this where we're not even allowed to talk about it, and then a couple years later, oh, that definitely was that was the truth?
I mean, that is the biggest danger here, is that people will no longer trust the media at all when these sorts of things happen. And I have to emphasize this because what you just read, the specific claims about who Biden did not recognize, December of 2022, okay? This is almost 2 years before the election. Halfway through his presidency, he reportedly he couldn't remember the names of his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. This is according to CNN in the book, or his communications director, Kate Bedingfield. He apparently, according to the authors, could not remember their names. And in the fall of 2023, he apparently did not recognize the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, which, by the way, that individual has pushed back on that claim. But in 2024, did not recognize George Clooney, apparently. We've seen all those headlines about how alarmed George Clooney was. Well, now we know why. If he didn't recognize him, that might be why. what do we do with this? I think we have to ask questions, and we have to not be shamed into not asking them. A lot of what has happened in this country the last couple of years has actually centered on making people afraid to simply ask questions, not
Right.
to peddle conspiracy theories, to ask questions. And when you make people afraid to do that, you erode trust, because guess what? Like you were just saying, some of these things appear to be coming true now, but I can't emphasize enough how dangerous and troubling this story is, that it is possible that the people around the most powerful individual in the world ignored, hid, shielded. I don't know how people trust those individuals ever again with anything,
Yeah.
managing anything, let alone a
Yeah.
country, knowing that that happened.
Well, and again, as political as this might sound, I don't think the point here is political. I think the idea is, if you are manipulating, covering, shaming, deplatforming, demonetizing, going back to things during COVID and now this, where you wonder why people, well, how can you trust some former Fear Factor MMA guy to give you the news? It's because he's the one that's actually asking the questions. I'm not saying there's not an endorsement of Joe Rogan, but the media is pushing people towards people like him, when even questioning the narrative is seen as somehow wrong or forbidden or even dangerous. And yet in that exact moment, it's the truth. And so I think, again, this is not Biden versus Trump. This is not left versus right. This is not, a political thing. This is like, hey, I hate this word. I don't know. It carries a lot of weight, but when the elite, when the gatekeepers are blocking information intentionally, and then a few months later saying, yeah, we did that. Where do you expect people to go except for new media sources, podcasters, sites that you don't want us to go on? It's like, well, you're pushing people in that direction. So don't complain when later people are getting their news from Joe Rogan. I mean, that's what happens when not only are your ideas quelled and your ideas suppressed, but again, going back to COVID, you could be demonetized, deplatformed, even put in some sort of like dangerous positions where it's like you can't question the narrative. A couple months later, that narrative wasn't true. So I think, again, Billy, this really isn't even about Joe Biden. This is about the gatekeepers, the people that make the new the purveyors of truth willingly, purposefully hid the truth for their own agendas. That, as you said, is a scary thing. And I'm as you know, Billy, I don't even like talking about politically divisive things, but to me, this isn't political. Billy, I'll give you the last word, buddy.
Yeah, this should have nothing to do with right or left or center. This has to do, and look, there are other elements of this too. I mean, as Christians, right, the thirst for power. I don't know people's hearts in this. All I can say is, if you see somebody who appears to be failing, if all of this is true, and it's more important to put that person back up to run again, to maintain power, it's more important to not seek treatment for that person, or allow them to maybe lean into whatever they need to do to get well, or to just live a normal life. There's so many other issues at the center of this that are not political. They're just human issues. And I mean, outside of the national security implications and all that. So it's a heartbreaking, these are all very heartbreaking claims. And we need to be praying for former President Biden's health, and really just for our country at this moment.
Yep. All right, Billy, thank you so much, my friend.